No, and Corey, you know, we've just seen that over the weekend. So I think that, in my view, it is right to ban racist thugs from public events, but instead of relegating them to the corners of society to hide out and to become more radicalised, we need to deal with them in a way that educates them. In an NRL game on Friday, Panthers winger Brent Naden was allegedly racially slurred by 8 people. With few spectators allowed into the game anyway because of COVID, they knew that their racist taunts would absolutely be heard on the field. No team needs these people as fans in any code. And so I think, should they be attending live sporting events at all? And if we've learnt anything post-COVID and all the lockdowns, we should be all respecting our freedom just a little bit more. It's an absolute privilege to attend any gathering in this point. Let's not forget those racist attacks that were levelled against Adam Goodes when he was during his spectacular AFL career. And racism from spectators in professional sport really isn't a new thing. Nobody is born a racist. People learn to hate along the lines of colour from the behaviour and the attitudes modelled by family, which also means it can be unlearned. The NRL and many sporting codes have Indigenous rounds. They sell the merchandise and commemorate with special jerseys and usually begin with some traditional acknowledgements. But has this become less about inclusion and more about box ticking? Is there something more we could be doing? Perhaps we need to open our sporting fixtures with our First Nations ceremonial dance, in the same way we see New Zealanders perform the Haka that most of us have come to learn and understand from watching the All Blacks games. I remember the white supremacist who opened fire on the Christchurch Mosque, and few could forget him, a white Australian man who was radicalised to hate along the lines of race and religion. In the aftermath, the young people of New Zealand, regardless of colour, came together to perform the Haka as a sign of peace, unity and love for each other. Have a look at this. Two weeks ago, we celebrated Brent Naden's heritage in the NRL's Indigenous round, and that sentiment shouldn't be for just one round. It's time that the NRL honoured their commitment to recognising and reconciling Australia's history and, in the process, educating would-be racist fans who patronise their games. Corey, I think that we've seen enough racism in sport over the last few years. I mean, it's a time-honoured tradition, unfortunately. But is it time that that we do more at sporting games?
Well, Emma, there's much in what you said that I absolutely agree with. There is no place for racism in sport, and I know the AFL, and I presume the NRL and others, ban spectators when they are not performing or not doing the right thing. But I'm not going to confuse booing a player, which some will say is wrong as well, as a racist taunt, because I don't think that is. And I'm also not buying into this whole First Nations, welcome to country ceremony that you seem to want to have there as a sign of respect. That was something that was invented in the 1970s. It doesn't unify people. I agree with you that the box ticking of acknowledging foreign or traditional owners and other cultures, I think, has become a bit trite and a bit passé. I think there needs to be something more meaningful. But ultimately, people go to watch sport because they want to celebrate great athletes. They want to cheer on their team. They should do it in a positive manner. Sometimes people get carried away with it. But in the whole, I think our major sporting administrators have got it pretty right, albeit I think the AFL's gone a bit too woke for some of its fans. Emma?
Well, I'm not sure that we agree on those things. I mean, fundamentally, we're agreeing that racism is a bad thing. I think that we, you and I are agreeing on that. Lauren, Canada, how do you see Australia and our inclusion of our Indigenous heritage?
Emma, I wanted to commend you, first of all, on the idea that we shouldn't completely excommunicate people from society if they have seemingly said something offensive to our culture or racist. Not a great thing, not a good thing. I think most of us in society are against racism. But I think it's great that you want to focus on reintegrating people and not excommunicating them. However, the idea that we can stamp out racism by putting a dance or an Aboriginal dance before an AFL or a rugby game is quite frankly, a ridiculous, one of the most neoliberal solutions to a complex problem I have ever heard. The idea that a dance is going to make anyone less racist or not be racist anymore it's just not in reality. I don't know how this is going to solve a problem. And that's a lot of the issue I have with when governments or policymakers try to solve racism issues in society. It's kind of like when we get these big issues, we're going to stop hate, we're going to stop racism. A lot of it ends up just being this ceremonial, performative wokeness that doesn't actually solve any of the issues. Also, I do want to touch on the fact that I wonder if 8, quite frankly, losers yelling at a rich sports player and then getting kicked out of a stadium is something worth reconstructing an entire industry over. It just seems like a little bit of overkill. And I'm not sure that any of the solutions that you proposed, not that I'm against them, sure, maybe we can do Aboriginal dances before games if people want to do that, but I don't feel that's going to actually change anything.
Right, so Lauren, we had an issue here, you're probably unfamiliar with it, back 3 or 4 weeks ago, a 12-year-old basketball game in Canberra, and the little girl who was playing was called a coon by someone on the opposition. Now,
it's horrible.
I mean, you know, we talk about a highly paid athlete, Brent Naden, going out there and being vilified on a football field, but that's representational and that is the tip of the iceberg. If you don't think that that's happening at local sporting fields and local community fields, then you're absolutely dead wrong, and I invite you to come to some of my niece and nephew's games, my own children, and to hear what does go on the sidelines. So it's not just for our elite athletes. And no, I don't think that the way of solving this is a simple dance, but as I alluded to in my editorial, we all learnt about the Haka and the meaning behind the Haka through watching it at the beginning of the All Blacks Rugby League games. Now, should none of us have been exposed to that and seen it so commonly done and so commonplace, some of us wouldn't have done any research behind it. So it's not the NRL's job to educate everybody and to solve the problem, but it's certainly their job to join the fight against where we're all trying to go, which is to educate people and provide that platform. So, Corey, I just want to come back to you.
Well, can I have a chance to respond here?
Yeah,
sure.
I want to point out, at no point did I say this isn't happening on local fields. I believe that there is horrible racism and sexism all over the world, unfortunately. You know, I deal with it as well. I've been called a real doll by Vice News, by Crikey. They've made fun of me for my race, for my gender. Unfortunately, this is a thing that happens within our society, especially to celebrities. If we deconstructed every institution after a famous person was called a terrible name, we would have no entertainment industry, quite frankly. Now, that's not to say it's a good thing or should happen or is right, but it happens to every race and every gender, and quite frankly, lately it's been happening a lot to white people as well. I hate when people portray it as just an issue that certain groups face. Racism and sexism happens to everybody and needs to be addressed overall. If we don't do that, if we don't change the language, then we are just going to create more demonization on all sides.